It's flipped now. It's completely reversed. Now 90% of the S&P 500 value is in intangible assets. I would argue, and I've written and spoken on this, that your most valuable asset does not even appear on the balance sheet, and that is your people.
Who doesn't want to be a great leader? A leader who's calm under pressure, insightful, respected, well-liked. But what does it take to become a great leader? Hey, I'm Boo, and welcome to my podcast. The Few Leadership Podcast defines great leadership and what great leadership looks like. And I've found some of the world's best leaders or experts in the field of leadership to help you accelerate your leadership journey so you can be an ace at the game of leadership. If you're ready to rethink everything you know about leadership, if you're excited about accelerating your leadership journey, let's strap in and ignite your leadership potential. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Few Leadership Podcast. Value. If there's a word that's thrown around and is misunderstood as value, I would be surprised. I just feel that in a world that is constantly fishing with clickbait, with people making impulsive decisions, with everyone racing to rock bottom in terms of what they spend for what they want, people being able to articulate value. Leading up to this podcast, I was chatting to Dave and he was telling me he's been defining value for almost 100 years. And I think that if we can take someone that's been appraising businesses, looking at businesses through the lens of value for almost 100 years, we're going to learn an awful lot today. Dave Bookbinder, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, finally on the show, as I was saying, you're one of the cursed three of our guests that just constantly seem to have an internet problem or something's broken. So I'm so excited that we managed to get here. Dave, you're casting your eye over a lot of businesses and you're seeing a lot of business owners, a lot of people that lead businesses. Everyone, when they sell something, they always think it's worth more than it is. And when you buy something, it always seems more expensive than what you're willing to pay. What are the challenge for a business owner and a leader to really get a true appreciation of value in a business beyond the book?
Man, so much time we could spend on that, my friend. I'll try and boil it down to some of the highlights. There's a statistic that I saw recently on, I think it was CNBC, and I think it was in the high 90 percentile of the number of business owners that actually don't know what their businesses are worth. And meaning they've never had a formal appraisal or valuation done. And they are relying on so much bad information, misinformation. They don't know what they don't know. And that's one of the biggest pitfalls that I see. Like they may go to a golf course and one of their buddies will say, hey, I sold my business for 10X. They don't know what that means, but if Joe sold his business for 10X, I should surely get 15. Yeah. And then they hear the word EBITDA. Some of them call it EBITDA. I've heard that mispronounced in so many different ways, and they don't know what it means or what it stands for, but they think it's sort of important. Anyway, you get the point. There's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of bad knowledge that's being shared by others. And I'll just shut up after this one other quick thought, because so many people will say, can you give me just a back of the napkin, back of the envelope appraisal? What am I worth? And I'm here to tell you that the back of the napkin and the back of the envelope are not valuation methods.
Yeah, they're not strategy methods either. Why is this important? Like, why is it important for business owners to understand this stuff?
Wow, because valuation can be a strategic tool. So most of the time, business owners aren't going to wake up tomorrow and say, I want to know what my business is worth. Wait for it. And they're willing to spend money to get the answer. What usually happens, Boo, is they're trying to do another thing. So maybe they want to gift shares to their kids. Maybe they want to buy or sell a business, grant stock options to their leadership team. You get it. They're trying to do a thing. And in the process of trying to do the thing, their accountant or their lawyer says, before you can do that, you need to get your business valued. And that's where it all starts from. But there's so many more strategic reasons why knowing what your business is worth matters, because it can be your North Star and guiding light in terms of how you're driving your decision making. And plus, oh, by the way, if you go through the process with somebody who's skilled at doing these types of things and has a consultative mindset, they may actually give you some insights into what the growth drivers are, what the risk factors are, and how you can not only just get a snapshot in time as what your value is, but how do you take that value and grow it?
Yeah, there seems to be those kind of breakout moments in value where you get to the 3 million mark and all of a sudden it gets a lot harder, and then you break through 3 and then you get to 8 and it gets a lot harder. So I'm assuming that, when you start to understand the value of your business, you can start to be a little bit more predictive about some of the problems that you're going to have and where you need to reinvest. So this is a big question as well. But on the back of a napkin, what do you see as the largest intangible contributor to an organization's value?
And that's a great question. And I'll share another little data point with you. Ocean Tomo recently published, I think it was 2020, the last time they put this chart out, the composition of the S&P 500 in terms of tangible versus intangible value. In like 1975, about 90% of the S&P 500 value was tangible assets, the stuff you can kick and punch and so forth. It's flipped now. It's completely reversed. And now 90% of the S&P 500 value is in intangible assets. And in my world, when valuing businesses and IP assets, the more popular ones that get the most attention are things like patents and trademarks, customer relationships. But I would argue, and I've written and spoken on this, that your most valuable asset does not even appear on the balance sheet, and that is your people.
Yeah, particularly with there's tales of woe of organizations that have exited at a particular valuation, and then the people leave or try to exit at a particular valuation, and then everyone runs for the doors 2 weeks before. And all of a sudden, the value of the business is eroded because the owner didn't cut him in for a share. They didn't bring him along for the journey. How do you value that? Like, if you look at the way that employee contracts are structured, you look at the undervalued investment in development of people, like how do you make a point? And what are the downsides for a business owner if they don't get their head around that?
Okay, so a couple things to unpack there. You can measure your people's performance. There's a lot of formulas that are out there, like human capital return on investment. I've got a couple of those in my book. You can find them online in terms of managing the investment in people. But in terms of how we value people, that's what started the whole process for me, and how my first book was born, was because as a valuation professional, I've valued people throughout my career and never actually thought that the profession and the methodology that we used allowed to really capture the full value of people for a couple of reasons. One, when we're valuing people in the context of an acquisition, it's only the acquired workforce that's being valued. So intangible value, and here in the US anyway, you can't book it unless you've acquired it. So that's one component. The methodology is something that's called a cost to replace. And for your folks out there in the HR world, that looks an awful lot like a turnover calculator. So when you go through that process of what it costs to replace an individual, underpinning assumption is you're all the same, you're all fungible. And if I know what your salary is and how long it's going to take to recruit for your position and what your learning curve is going to look like, you're all the same, and I can hire somebody else at a fraction of your salary. The reality of the matter is, as you alluded to, when people leave an organization, the impact is multiples of their salary. So there's that. So that's why I started down this journey of trying to change the conversation. And my lens is more about, or should I say less about the changing the valuation methodologies. I've got my hands tied right now until the profession decides to change the way we think about people being on a balance sheet. I don't know that it really resonates as much, but when I tell business owners that if you do the right thing around your people from a leadership and corporate culture perspective, it can increase your business enterprise value. Now I have their attention. So I'm connecting the dots between those components. It's leadership, it's culture, and all those things lead to increased enterprise value.
One of the button items for us with leadership is around people's biases and beliefs and their blind spots, right? Tell me some of the interesting delusions you've come across in terms of business owners trying to sell a business or value their business.
I'll give you a couple. So there's a couple of things that come to my mind. These are classics. So the first one, in the spirit of they don't know what they don't know, a business owner was putting a valuation on their company. The company was EBITDA negative, and they happened to be in an industry that their peer group looked EBITDA negative at this particular point in time. So they applied a negative EBITDA multiple to their negative EBITDA, and suddenly they were a multi-billion-dollar business. So yeah, let that marinate for just a second. And I'll tell you another one that was priceless back in the era of the .com situation, working with the CFO for one of those .com companies. And he provided me with some information. I asked for a forecast, and he gave me literally a 20-year plan. And over the course of 20 years, they never became positive in terms of profitability. And your spider senses are tingling, right? So how do you stay in business? How do you make money if you never become positive in terms of profit? And he literally scolded me and told me that I don't know anything about value and that they're making more money based on eyeballs. And for every dollar that they lose, their market cap is going to increase. Well, they were gone in 6 months.
Wow.
So those are two, and maybe they're more of extreme examples. But I think when you talk about valuing businesses, the day-to-day privately held company that I see, the problem they're making is they're managing their business to not pay taxes.
Yeah.
And when they do that, so they're showing no profit, little profit. And then one day they get the offer out of the blue. A competitor or somebody in my space just gave me an LOI out of the blue and they valued my company at this. How do I think about it? Well, how you think about it is now we have to start rationalizing all the add backs we need to talk about, because if you present them your financial statements as they currently exist, you got a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah. As a business owner for 20 years, that it is a challenge because you do want to optimize your tax strategies. But I guess, I recently did a program where it's an organization that takes small businesses and sets them up for a 5-year journey to sell at a pretty decent multiple and aggregates them. So you can aggregated multiplier. They're right from the start. They're like, the business needs to be moral. It needs to be compliant, needs to pay taxes. And then that's your exit. If you've got that 5-year runway and everything is clean and you're making a profit and you aggregate, then your multiplier increases.
Yeah, you just touched on something that I think it's worth emphasizing. And you talked about the 5-year program. And underpinning that is that the exit is not just the transaction, it's a process. And you need to get ready, you need to be prepared. And some of that is getting your financial statements in order so that you can show solid, whether it's audited or reviewed, statements that were prepared by an independent accounting firm that shows the history of growth, margin expansion, and things like that. And then getting the rest of your back office stuff in line so that you've got a leadership team, so that if you get hit by the proverbial bus, the business just doesn't go away because there's risk in that. And then your processes and your procedures so that you're ready. When you go to the market, you've got all your boxes checked.
Yeah, the old data room. It's, and people try and shop their companies around, I guess. And the amount of additional burden that comes with shopping your company around and updating your data rooms and courting suitors. I mean, how do you do this really well? Like, how do you do it without wasting time? To run through the due diligence process for an exit and the burden that it places on your team. I mean, I've done it 4 or 5 times. It's 2 or 3 of those you don't end up selling, and you just end up having burned phenomenal resources. So are there some kind of gates or big rocks in the bucket that you need before you even consider going on this journey? And do people really understand what's involved?
Do they understand what's involved? I guess it depends on who they're talking to on the golf course and where they get their info. But best way to navigate that process from my perspective as a former investment banker, as somebody who advises companies with an organization that does investment banking, hire yourself a good investment banker, not the business broker. I mean, if you're a very small company, an investment banking firm probably will refer you to a broker. But if you're of a substantial size, get yourself a good investment banker who is skilled in doing transactions, because they'll take a lot of the burden off of you and they'll run the process, because the process of doing what I'll refer to as the auction, going out to multiple potential buyers, creates tension in the marketplace, which is going to only increase your valuation. And a lot of business owners are reluctant to do that because they don't want to pay a fee. And it doesn't sound like, when it's all said and done, the banker will pay for themselves in terms of what they're able to do in terms of drive value and give you back your time to run your business while they're doing the hard work of getting you sold.
If you're enjoying the show, I'd just like to ask you a little favor. We're on a mission here to ignite the world's leadership potential. We need to reach out to as many leaders as we possibly can. So if you're enjoying the show, I just ask you to leave a review, to subscribe, to help introduce this podcast to other leaders to join you on your journey to flawless leadership. We're going to head back to the episode now. I hope you've enjoyed what you've learned today. Please remember, let's ignite a movement of flawless leaders. Subscribe, leave a review. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, it's not one of those areas you want to penny pinch, because right back at the start we were talking about, my friend sold a business for a multiplier of 10x, and I have heard so many multipliers and 10x this and 22x that, and he sold it at 82 times earnings, and what is going on with all these numbers? It just sounds like it's a Disneyland fairy tale where people just plucking numbers out their butt. Or is there meant to be a science to it?
Well, there's meant to be a science to it, but I agree with you. They're pulling a lot of numbers from their butt for sure. And again, depending on where you go for info, I recently dropped a book called The Valuation Toolbox for Business Owners and Their Advisors. And I did it because I wanted to give away as many as I can for these business owners who don't know what they don't know. In there is one of the articles I wrote about the mistakes that business owners make when valuing their business. And it was originally a top 10 article, and I had to expand it to top 11 and then top 12. The first expansion was because I actually found something on the internet where a business owner actually was advocating, don't waste your time getting a formal valuation done. Here's all you need to do. Go to this here website, grab your industry EBITDA multiple, and then multiply it by your company's revenue. Think about that. Yes, I didn't make the mistake. I'm being dead serious. They want you to take your revenue and multiply it by an EBITDA multiple.
Wow.
Yeah, really
That's insane.
Yeah, just bad wrong. But there's science to it, because if you're going to do it right, you got to research the market. So the analogy that I love to use to make it really simple is if anybody's ever bought or sold a home, the first thing they do probably is call a realtor and ask them to get you some comps, right? What have other homes in the neighborhood sold for? And then you start to make the adjustments. Well, how many bedrooms does your home have versus the ones that have sold recently? Bathrooms, access to transportation, shopping, schools, etc. It's a similar thing in the business valuation world. I'm only talking about this one methodology, the merger and acquisition method. But if you're researching recent transactions in your space or your industry spaces, and where there's disclosure, you'll get valuation multiples. And then from those multiples, if you do a little bit of analysis and understand how you differ from those target transactions in terms of size and growth and profitability and other things, you get a better handle on what's a reasonable multiple to think about for your business. And that's just one way to think about it.
I guess it's also comes down to perception as well, right? Like if you have a book value for your business, but if someone's in an urgent need or they're trying to deploy capital or they need to get an aggressive roll-up strategy, how important is timing in terms of achieving the right multiple for your business?
Now, timing is everything, but I want to touch on something you just talked about when you alluded to book value, because I had a situation not too long ago where somebody came to me. They had gotten an offer to purchase their share of the company, and he provided the LOI for me, and I saw that it was a multiple of book value, basically 1 times book.
Yep.
And book value and market value are two different things. Book value is what the cost of something is. Market value is what a willing buyer is going to pay for it. And like most people, this guy didn't want to spend any money, and I implored him, whether you work with me or you don't, go somewhere and at least have somebody vet this for you, because I think you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And he eventually came back and said, all right, can you help me out? So sure, ran some numbers for him in the transaction space to help him identify what businesses have sold for in his space. And the short story is we saved him about $24 million. Had he just accepted the offer as it was, he would have left a lot of money on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so much personality comes into it. You know, there's that personality types that are like quiet and shy and kind of undervalue themselves, and that the value of themselves is reflected in their perceived value of the business. And you've got the other folks that are like value themselves so highly and they're insane in terms of what their business value is. How do you manage that? I mean, because clearly when people are looking to enter into an arrangement with you, what you're going to derive could be controversial for some people. How do you manage the ego or the self-conscious types? You must be almost like a borderline counselor.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. There's definitely a lot of that. And I hear that from a lot of folks in the consulting space. But I'll share another story with you to emphasize the point here. Worked with a business owner recently who was gifting shares to his kid, who's going to take over ownership of the company. And part of our diligence includes a question like, have you gotten other offers for the business recently? And they had. And they shared the offer with me, which was a couple of years ago. And it looked like a decent enough offer. So I asked, well, what happened here? Well, they decided to pass on it for a couple of reasons. Ego, because they felt first and foremost, if somebody's going to come unsolicited and they're going to offer me this, well, surely I can do better. So my plan's going to be, I'm going to pass on this offer and I can earn that on the come over the next 3 years and then sell the company for more. But here's what happened. When you look at their performance over the last couple of years and you sum their profitability, they didn't even come close to that offer. And oh, by the way, they would have sold, had they accepted the offer, at an EBITDA multiple of north of 17.
Wow.
But given their performance and the way their industry has performed now in the current situation, their valuation's around 7 times. So There's a good example of where ego, maybe a little bit of greed got in the way. But yeah, to your point about the therapist piece, there's definitely a lot of that. And it's just a matter of being transparent, share facts, share data, share a lot of experience. Like I said, I've done this for a long time, and I think I can usually give some business owners some insights from where I've come from and what I've seen.
You've just touched on something really important in our practice in terms of strategy to execution and accelerating achievement of strategic goals. A big part of it is operating the world of facts, not in fiction. And we have a debrief methodology, which is really about taking the numbers you want, compare them to the numbers you have, and then ask, why is there a gap between the two, and then do something about it. And I imagine the amount of leverage you get coming from that factual background and that fixed baseline makes all the difference for these individuals. Have you ever had a particular owner that you just couldn't work with? Someone that was just like, just didn't want to face reality?
No, I can't say that I had that. I did have the joy of actually firing a client or two over the years, which was really liberating and empowering. But that wasn't as much about how they were perceiving our work or their opinion of value. It was more how they behaved as human beings. And I think you said it, you like to work with people that you like to work with. And yeah, they weren't that type.
So from your perspective as a professional, you must get a sense of when you walk into an organization that this feels like a high value organization, or you walk into an organization and you go, this feels like a low value organization. What are the kind of rule of thumbs? Like, what are your spidey senses picking up when you instantly feel high value compared to low value business?
I'll give you a great example, because again, this happened to me recently. Walked into a business owner's office. The business owner doesn't understand financial terminology, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I get it. You're good at what you do, and maybe you've got people that can handle the financial speak for you. And I see that all the time. But it turns out there is no next level. There is no CFO, controller, bookkeeper, person who's running the numbers. And when I asked for some financial information, I was presented with a bunch of Post-it notes and a big sheet of paper with marker on it with some numbers and some X's and some scratches. And that's a big red flag that's not a valuable business. They don't even know what they have. But to your point, the spidey sense, you're absolutely right. Like if I walk into an organization and the offices are neat, they're tidy. You walk into the business owner's office and it's a clean environment. They're sharp, they're on point, they're articulate. You know it. I mean, everybody out there who's listening gets it. They know exactly what the vibe is or isn't as they make their own assessments about people day to day, of how they're dressed, how they speak, how they interact with others. You kind of know where things might fall.
Yeah, we kind of decoded the 8 steps of a human decision, and the research is so compelling that 90 to 95% of our final decision is based on a perception. It's got nothing to do with the reality, and then we try and make the reality match our perception. And I guess if you want to be considered valuable, you've got to behave in a way that looks valuable to shape the narrative and the facts in your direction. Because even in your world, I mean, there's always a lever to pull, right? You can err on the side of value or err on the side of less value as your perception of the numbers changes. I mean, surely there's a degree of art in what you do. It's not just purely science.
Yeah, it's a mixture of art and science, or as I would refer to it, it's math and judgment. But the one thing that I am very, very cognizant of is to not allow those impressions to cloud judgment. And a great example of that is, I'll refer to Mark Cuban on Shark Tank. Robert Herjavec is another shark. Saw a recent quote from him that when Mark Cuban first showed up for his first season of Shark Tank, he couldn't imagine what's up with this guy. He showed up in a t-shirt, underdressed. Everybody else was dressed to the nines. So when you think about perception, Cuban's the outlier there in the t-shirt. And what Herjavec's takeaway was, you got to watch out for the guy who's underdressed in the room, because that may be the sleeping tiger. So sometimes those preconceived notions can be deceiving, especially when you're walking into a tech business where, the CEO could be wearing a t-shirt and flip-flops. And then you see a financial statement and, they're a $100 million business.
Yeah, the world certainly tended that way over the last few years. So Dave, in terms of the leaders jumping off this podcast and they're now curious about maybe exiting a business or maybe even buying a business, what are your top tips in terms of traps a leader might fall into when it comes to someone cooking the books or hyping their value? What tip would you give? I guess they're different tips, right? But for someone looking to buy into a business, what would be the red flags for you?
So from a historical financial perspective, something called a quality of earnings is usually a good thing to get. Have an independent organization come in and really kick the tires and vet the numbers for you so that you know exactly where the company has been historically. But valuation is also a very much forward-looking exercise. So it's really what's the present value of the future cash flows look like. So you need to get a clear picture on the future. And I see it a lot in my world where I'm handed what I refer to as the hockey stick forecast. So if you can envision the hockey stick on the ice, you got the blade, which is the flat line, and the shaft that goes up to the right. That's what the projections look like. So they may have been chugging along on the blade at the flat line, and then over the next 5 or 6 years, all of a sudden they're blasting off to the moon. That's a huge red flag. You need to understand those underpinnings and really drill into it.
Awesome. Hey, Dave, thanks for your patience. It's so great to get you here.
Hey, man, third time's the charm. This was great.
Yeah, and it's awesome as well just to unpack some of the mysteries and myths around valuations. Sometimes it just seems to be an indulgence with people when they just throw around all these ridiculous numbers and big ideas. It's great to understand that there is a science, there is a methodology. And if you want to reach out, all of Dave's links are in the podcast notes below. There's a ton of great podcasts, a ton of books that are super valuable as well. Thanks for bringing value to us today, Dave. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you. Take care.